Welcome back to another episode of the Real Life Investing Podcast with Jason and Rachel Wagner. Rachel, we're celebrating 5,000 downloads.
Yeah, today. I know. It's amazing.
It's pretty awesome.
Yeah. And I will tell you, the struggle has been real to actually record anything new.
Yeah. Why as of recently? First off, the summer stinks.
Yeah.
The summer really stinks.
Yeah. We, you might even be able to hear a little bit of the struggle in the background. The reality of where we're at. I mean, we welcomed a new baby boy in May and made the decision to embark on homeschooling this fall. And so what we're, not realizing, because we obviously knew this was going to be the case, but discovering is time is flying by and it's not our own, and finding the time to have a quiet space and do a recording is a very, very new struggle.
Yeah, it's a very real struggle right now.
But we're here, and we're doing it.
Yeah, in the summer, the kids are home, and, they're always here.
They're always here. And now that remains true.
And that remains true because we decided
future.
Because we decided to homeschool Scarlett.
Yeah, which has been amazing. I'm really glad that we're doing that. I think that was the right decision.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. No, it's going to be amazing. Well, so that's our life.
Well, and the beautiful thing is it kind of leads into some of what we're talking about as part of the homeschool. Scarlett gets to shadow you during appointments where that makes sense. And so you've been able to have some new conversations with her about real estate and what it means to own a property, what it means to rent a property. And we haven't gone into the details of what we're going to talk about today, but at some point it'll be a great lesson for her too.
Yeah, because we recently had the tenants move out of our last house, our single family home that we had in Jefferson Park. The tenants lived there for 2 years, and I brought Scarlett over to see how the house looked after the tenants moved out. And kind of a fun experience, because she's like, "Oh, Dad, they didn't really take care of it here." And I'm like, well, when you move out of a house, it's still going to be pretty messy. And then you do start to identify things that are like, oh yeah, there's a lot of burnt out light bulbs, and it does look a little messy over there. And
I asked her how it went.
There is permanent stains on some things, and I ultimately told her, I said, at the end of the day, Scarlett, everything is fixable, and that's the cool part. Part of this next exercise with her is that she did see it when they moved out. And then now we've just recently kind of fixed everything. And I do want to bring her back before the new tenants move in, so that she can kind of see the whole transformation of like, oh, my house looks like, or this house looks like what it used to look like when I lived here. So it'll be a kind of a cool before and after.
Yeah.
For the kids.
Yeah, it's so cool to hear what a kid's perspective is on some of the stuff. Because I remember asking her how it went, and she's like, it was so messy. It was just so funny.
They had just moved out.
Yeah.
So, yeah. It is what it is. At the end of the day, a tenant is not going to treat your property the way that you would treat your property. And so the expectation should not be that they're going to treat it the same way that you would.
Yep. And it's baked into your cost, right?
Yeah.
Your budget.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Well, that leads to, speaking of tenants, it leads into our new topic, which is talking about our experience with our first eviction, where we finally saw it, the distance. We went from giving a notice. This was on the commercial building that we bought. We actually had an episode where we talked about this commercial building, our first commercial apartment. And that was actually a pretty good episode. There's a lot that's in our top 5 download list of people being interested in how we purchased our commercial property. Well, as we've owned this one over the last, or a little bit over a year, about a year and a half, we had one unit that was kind of remaining that was really gross, not renovated, full of cockroaches, like a really bad infestation there. But people were living there, and those people were hoarders, and they had lived in the building for, I believe, 7 years. And it looked like they just moved in because they still had boxes everywhere, and it was just really gross.
And were they on a lease or were they living month to month?
They were technically on a month-to-month agreement. And so when we acquired the building, we acquired the tenants. And that was kind of like, this is the problem unit. They were still paying. Their rent was $950. It's a 2-bedroom, 1-bath in Portage Park.
Which is very low.
Yeah, very low. Also, but probably appropriate for the condition of the unit. Like, it was gross. And it's not renovated at all. So I made the decision to terminate their lease. And I gave them, because they lived in the property more than 3 years, you got to give them a 120-day notice. So I gave them a 4-month notice. So on July 31st of 2024, I gave them a notice that they need to move out by the end of November, so November 30th.
So just curious, since you made the point that they had lived there longer than 3 years, they got a 120-day notice. What's the notice if it's under 120 days?
60 days.
Excuse me.
Yep. So
under 3 years.
In Chicago is actually Lori Lightfoot that put in this new ordinance, at least for the amount of notice that you need to give somebody. So if a tenant has lived in the property for more than 3 years and you are going to increase their rent, put them on a new lease, or terminate their lease, they need a 120-day notice. So that's 4 months.
Yeah, it's a lot.
4 months to let somebody know. And if they've only lived there for less than 3 years, it's just 60 days.
Okay.
So you have to abide by that. And so I gave them, the 4-month notice. And they agreed. They said, okay, we understand, the unit's in really bad shape, and, it would just be best if we got out of here too. So they were in agreement.
So your notice wasn't your rent is going up. Your notice is you need to vacate.
I wanted to terminate their lease because that unit needed to be addressed.
Okay.
It's an infestation of cockroaches, and I can't address the unit when it looks the way it is.
Yeah, of course.
It's not clean whatsoever. The air that you would breathe in that unit was like hot, gross, nasty air. This is not a place for humans to be living.
Yeah.
Honestly, it was that bad. When we did the inspection on the property, the inspector had to wear an N95 in there the entire time, and I'm like, dude, I'm not going to sit in that unit while you're inspecting this thing. Why don't you go in there, do your thing, and come back out and let me know how it goes.
Yeah.
And he's like, I could feel it through the N95 that my respiratory system was like getting affected.
Yeah.
So,
but didn't you have somebody who went through the unit who said that there's a particular smell that comes from like a hoarder house?
Yeah, it was actually one of the the pest control guy when he first came, and I met him there the first time, and he's like, "Oh, hoarder smell." I was like, "What? They come with a smell?" He's like, "Oh yeah.
It's a distinct,
just nasty smell."
Yeah. And you got to think about how that's impacting the other tenants in the building, right? Like with the infestation of cockroaches, there's going to be some overspill into other units. And so
that's
that
what
impacts,
was happening.
It
because
impacts
the
other
unit,
people's experience.
Yeah, the unit above, we were trying to lease it. And as I was doing some of the showings, I was like, dude, I'm finding roaches in this. Like the roaches, it's a vacant unit right now and it looks really good, but there's roaches in the cabinets.
Yeah.
And there's roaches that are crawling on the floor. And it's coming directly below from this unit. And so I had to, over the course of time, we just had a regular pest service that would come in and, they would treat just that unit, because I would ask all the tenants if they were seeing any activity in their other units. It was only this ground zero unit that was really the big problem. So anyways, we addressed it. And actively tried to, help it. So they have a notice to move out, and November, 30th comes, and they're like, "Yeah, we're not going anywhere." And what happened a couple months before that was that the head of household. So there's really 3 people in this unit. 2 that are in their 60s, and then their older son, who's probably in his 40s. Living together. And what happened to the head of household, who was the guy that I was talking to about all of this, was that he landed in a nursing home because he had a stroke. And here's the interesting part. He actually puts his stroke on the COVID vaccine, which he told me that. And he's like, it was the COVID vaccine that put me in this hospital, and now I've had a stroke. And then it's just, he never got better. Like, they never ended up releasing him. He's still there now, which is kind of crazy.
Well, and has made this process like super difficult, right? Like, you issued that notice back in July, and when did that whole thing happen? Because that person's not even living there.
No, he's not living there. All of his stuff is there.
Right. And the other two people were living there.
And the other two people were living there.
The person, on the lease isn't living there. And
Yep.
Yeah, it's complicated.
Yeah, exactly. And so, it's made it a very difficult situation where I've got the head of household in a nursing home. His wife and son are living in the apartment, not taking care of it. His wife is disabled, doesn't move around very good. I know his son has a number of issues himself as well, and actually we're just dealing with like handicapped people. The whole family at this point is just handicapped.
Yeah.
And so it makes it really challenging. And so I did the best that I could. I told them, I'm like, hey, I can help you look for other apartments, and I would actively look on what was available on the rental market, and I would send them opportunities, and then they were just like, no, it needs to be first floor, it needs to be under, we're spending $950 now, we'd actually like to spend something that's $800. And I'm just like, dude, you can't. He's like, I need to have a 2-bedroom, and I'm just like, dude, you just can't get that. So we have a problem of they can't just go find something else that suits their needs. I'm actively trying to help them, and it's just not quite working.
So this time frame is like between the time that you gave them notice and then when the new rent was going to increase. So during that 120-day period.
Well, I didn't really. I gave them an increase of rent notice, like, hey, here's what you could do if you want to continue to stay here. But we wanted the termination.
Okay, that's right. You just said
we wanted the termination. Yeah.
Okay.
Because the increased rent wasn't going to make sense for them.
Okay, so you give them the notice. You're trying to help them find a place, and then you get to the point where they're supposed to vacate.
And they don't, right? And so from here, this is where we file a suit of, now we need to get this into the court to start the eviction process.
And did they continue to pay their month-to-month rate?
So when you go to terminate somebody's lease and they are still there after your time frame and they're on a month-to-month, you cannot accept new rent. He wanted to pay me his December rent. He wanted to pay me that $950. But I said, I'm not accepting it.
Because you want the unit vacated.
Because I want the unit vacated, because this is a big problem within this apartment building.
Yeah, and that's a tough decision and a good, I think, distinction on the rules is had you accepted that rent, would that have made your 120-day notice null and void? Because you would have essentially entered into a new month-to-month agreement with them.
Oh, exactly. Yes.
Yeah. So if you would have accepted payment for rent at the end of that 120 days, you then would have had to have started that 120-day process all over again because you've got this verbal, so to speak, month-to-month written agreement.
Yes. Yeah. And sometimes a tenant will send it to you electronically by Zelle, and you're supposed to immediately send that back.
Is there a time frame for which you have to do that?
Like immediately.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, so he wanted to pay you rent. You said, no, you need to vacate. Mm-hmm. And what'd they say?
Yeah. So from there, I said, they actually told me, well, serve me the eviction paperwork. Because they're like, hey, I'm sorry, I've been hoping that we could do this, but we've got this, I've got my health problems that are going on, and, my son can't do this by himself, and my wife's not able to do this, and, we don't have a lot of money to hire movers or anything like that, and we can't find a new place, and they told me, well, serve us the eviction paperwork, because then we can go and take that to social services, or I might be able to find a place, and and they want to see that I've been served, so that can help us look for a place. I said, okay, I'll work on that, no problem. So I contact the attorney, and we filed a complaint on December 16th. And it's kind of funny. So as I got referred to this attorney. I probably wouldn't refer them to other people. It wasn't that good of an experience. There was a lot of fumbles that happened along the way. Like, this is just the reality of it, right? And not to talk bad about anybody, but it's just, it wasn't, this eviction process is not going to be smooth. You just have to plan that this is going to be a very long time. It's going to be a frustrating time. It does not help that if you fumble some things along the way either. Right. So,
well, and there was some interesting discussion with the attorney throughout the process of like frustration on our end of lack of urgency. And the response that was given a couple times was like, look, you don't want to overly push the sheriff's department or the court system, because then they're just going to delay you more on purpose because they don't want to be pushed. So you got to kind of like coddle them and be really nice. And it was kind of like, this is ridiculous. Like who knows if that was true or accurate, but that was the communication that was coming from the attorney is like, look, I've done this so many times. I know we've got to kind of handle this with, delicacy. And it's like, well, in the meantime, we're not getting paid. Well, and the unit continued to degrade.
Everybody's going to have that same mindset, right? It's like, this is getting ridiculous. It's taking too long. I mean, we haven't gotten to the details of why we needed them to push, because there was literally some oversight by the sheriff department where we were on the book scheduled to be evicted the next day. And then all of a sudden we weren't, and we were removed. And then all of a sudden they said that our eviction order was expired. And I'm like, how the hell do we have an expired eviction order when it's taken this long? Like, I didn't even know these things expire.
Okay, so let's back up. So you filed the eviction paperwork.
Right. So we filed the eviction paperwork. And that was on December 31st. Okay. So actually, which was funny, we filed it on the 16th, and then I noticed that there were errors. So then they had to file it again, and then that was on the 31st of December. Okay. So then you get set up with a new court date, or with your first court date, and that's like 2 months away from when you file. So that was on February 10th. So we filed the second complaint, because the first one was wrong. We filed the second complaint on December 31st. We didn't get a court date until February 10th. Mm-hmm. Well, the tenants didn't show up. Okay, so then you get a continuance, and the judge is like, well, maybe they can come to the next one, right? So then you have your second court date, and that was on February 25th. So not that much longer, and the tenants didn't show up to that either. So here I was thinking like, oh, they don't show up, and then we're told that the eviction becomes enforceable after 7 days from that second court date. And so here I'm thinking, oh, we're all of a sudden going to get like approval on this eviction order, and it's only been a couple months.
Yeah, 3 months.
That sounds pretty good.
Yeah.
Right. That sounds pretty good.
Yeah. Still 3 months no payment though.
But they have this thing where it's like the tenants can appeal within the next 7 days from that eviction order, or from that second court date. And so, let's see, what do I write here? So the eviction is enforceable after 7 days. If not gone by, the eviction is enforceable by 7 days. If the tenants didn't move out by March 5th, we can place the order with the sheriff. And we were actually awarded a judgment on them. This was a default judgment of about $3,400.
And what does that mean?
So eventually, like, they actually just kind of calculate, like, because in the process he was like, okay, how much rent did they actually owe you? Because they start to look at, okay, when did the lease end, and then how many months have they been there for? And so they automatically will put a judgment on the past due rent, right? Because they're still in the property. And from what I've learned is that you can try to go after and, put a judgment on them and garnish their wages and, try to get some of this back due rent. But I don't really have a lot of success stories of people doing that. And I eventually just kind of dropped that, is like, I didn't care about, getting the the rent that was due. They already had a low amount. And I was willing to just, if we could just move this along get them to move out, I'm totally okay with not having, them paying me the past due rent and just give me possession back. It seems very reasonable.
Oh, yeah, that's very fair.
All right. So they tell me, hey, if on March 5th, if they're still living there, let's see, March 5th, if they're still living there, I can expect 7 to 8 weeks for the sheriff. So if on March 5th they're still living there, then we would have an enforceable eviction, and then we'd have to put it in with the sheriff, and that's going to take another 7 to 8 weeks.
Because the sheriff is backlogged.
Because the sheriff is backlogged on all this stuff. So within that 7-day window, after that second court date, the tenant actually got in touch with an attorney, and they filed a motion to vacate the default judgment. So now we get like a curveball thrown at us where, yeah, just because the tenants didn't show up to the court date, but they did get in touch with somebody, with an attorney to help them through this. And so that attorney was able to file a motion to get rid of the default judgment, which led us into a negotiation of, hey, we'll drop the judgment if you move out by a certain date. And so the tenants needed more time to move out. And so we agreed that the tenants would move out by May 15th. And this was March 24th at the time when we made this agreement. You still following? Mm-hmm. Okay. So then from there, we were going to say, okay, if they don't move out by May 15th, it's going to be another 4 to 8 weeks for us to get possession of the unit back. And that's going to place us in July. Okay. So then May 15th comes and they don't move out. And so we finally get the eviction in the sheriff queue, and that doesn't happen until, for some reason, June 2nd. And then we finally, on July 1st, we get scheduled to evict. That's going to be the day, July 1st. So as what I was expecting is like, okay, it's going to land in July. We're going to have this eviction happen. And so when you get notified that, hey, you're finally on the schedule, the sheriff is going to come, they notify you like the business day before it's going to happen. And you have to have somebody be there between a 4-hour window. And so you have to drop everything that you're doing and meet the sheriff there. And if you don't approach the sheriff within 5 minutes of them pulling up, apparently you could miss it. And so super important to make sure that you have somebody there. And so I cleared my schedule. And I was like, all right, we're going to go do this. The sheriff's going to pull these guys out. It's kind of as what we expected on the timeline, and we're going to get possession back. So then literally the night of, we just found out about it during the day. And then later that night, we find out that, oh no, our eviction order expired. And we're not on the list anymore. And we're canceled.
Yeah. Expired from the court, right?
Yeah. The original one. And I'm like, what the fuck?
Which you had no control over anyway.
No.
Right?
And I was like, how do you even have an expired eviction order? Like, I didn't know that these things expire. And if you're in a county that takes so long to go through this process, why would the expiration date be so short?
Right. How would it even ever work? Like if the court gives you 6 weeks, for example, and the sheriff needs 7 to 8, you're always going to expire. It's
like,
just
what the hell?
Like
You're
ridiculous.
You're set up to fail.
Yeah.
Like this was insane.
Yeah, Cook County.
And so it takes us a while to like figure out like what the hell happened.
And at this point, you're already at a year from having given them notice to vacate in 4 months.
At this point, I am at that year mark of when I gave them notice, 4 months notice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
how about
8 months of not being paid, 12 months of just dealing with the communication and the process of this in general. Yeah.
Yep. So then I get kind of frustrated with the attorney. I'm like, how the hell does this happen? And he's like, well, it shouldn't have expired because we actually filed a second eviction order. And they should have been able to cross-reference and look that there was a second one that was approved that has a longer expiration date.
Yeah. And I remember this time because this is when there was like a lot of conversations happening of like trying to get in touch with the sheriff saying one thing, the attorney saying something different, something else happening in actuality. It was just like nobody knew what the hell was going on. Like when we were like trying to figure out just in communication, like what's happening with this eviction. I have no idea. I don't know what's going on with this eviction. I have no idea. It was supposed to happen. Now it's not happening. I don't know. We might have to go back to court. Like just a shit show.
It was a shit show. And then at the same time, I've got a partner on this, right? So, and is it okay if I say who he is or no? Okay. No, I won't say it. But bless his heart, because he's just like, I'm getting a little impatient on this. And I'm like, I know. I am too. And he's like, well, what's stopping us from just, sitting outside one night and just watching him walk outside of the unit and then just going and,
changing the locks.
And I'm like, that I think is called a self-eviction and is actually punishable as like a felony.
Yeah.
So I don't think that's a good idea. He's like, what?
Yeah. Because from the business standpoint, it is wild. It is wild that you can have ownership of a property yet have zero control. You have had zero control over this unit for 8 months at this point, arguably, right? Mm-hmm. No payment, no control over the unit. Your hands are tied, and you're still obligated to pay your mortgage. Mm-hmm. Right, so this is like a little bit of the risk. So not a little bit. This is the risk side of owning properties and renting them out because you're still on the hook to make your payments, but you're not receiving payment, and there's nobody helping you speed this along.
Nobody is helping you.
And if you aren't like aware of what you can and can't do, you could make a lot of missteps along the way.
Well, and here's the thing is that we filed this eviction right away. Mm-hmm. Because they were supposed to move out November 30th, and then we filed it the next month. Mm-hmm. So technically right away. But imagine when you're in the position of you're dealing with a tenant who just stopped paying you, and they're telling you, hey, I'll get it to you next month. I'll get it to you next week. All of a sudden, that turns into 3 months. Mm-hmm. So if you've got a scenario where you're like, dude, they're 3 months behind. They keep telling me they're going to get it. I think I'm finally going to go ahead and do the eviction paperwork. Well, then you just stacked another 4 to 9 months on top of the 3 months that you're late.
Right. And you want to pay attention to that too, because let's just say somebody's, lived there for 2.5 years or something, and they've got a few more months left on their lease. Like the amount of notice you're required to give them then too for eviction, is that longer, or is that only if you're ordering them to vacate?
No, the notice is the same.
Okay.
The notice is the same.
So even if they ticked over to living there 3 years, there's nothing that would change in that non-payment
because
process.
they're still behind on the rent.
Okay.
Right. So really what you need to do is that when somebody stops paying you rent, and if they don't pay you rent by the 5th, like it's late on the 6th, and if you've got a problem tenant and like you kind of know that, on the 6th, you should be serving them a 5-day notice to pay rent. And that 5-day notice is a legal document that will then start the process of then you can issue the complaint, and you could start the eviction process. Right. So you need to serve them this 5-day notice on this lease termination. The lease had already ended, and they were still occupying the unit. Right. So we were able to file the complaint right away. Mm-hmm. But if you've got somebody who hasn't paid you rent, you still have a lease agreement with them. You need to be very proactive with issuing this 5-day notice, and that needs to be served to them in person, and it needs to be given to somebody that is, I believe, above 13 years of age that lives in the unit. So you can it doesn't have to be the adult household. It just needs to be somebody that is above 13 years of age. I remember when I was in the property management class at Chicago Association of Realtors that I took, the guy that was doing, his name was Taft West, and he's like legendary in Chicago. And he would go with a smiling face, and he would go and like knock on the door, and say a kid would like open the door, and he'd be like, "Hey, buddy," and he wouldn't tell him why he's there. He'd be like, "Hey, buddy, how are you?" "Oh, good." he would ask, if his parents were home, and he'd be like, yeah, and remind me again, how old are you? And he'd be like, 14. Perfect. Here, can you give this to your mom and dad? Right. So, so you actually have to physically serve that 5-day notice to people. Okay. So then that complaint is then issued, and so you just have to like keep that stuff in mind. So
okay, so let's go back to our timeline. So it was supposed to be on the sheriff's schedule, but then we got canceled. We don't really know why, but you do a new court date, right? Because it expired.
Yeah. So then all of a sudden we're spending basically the whole month of July trying to figure out what the hell happened.
Yeah, that was that. Nobody knew what was going on.
Nobody knew what was going on, and I have this fear of like, dude, we just started back at the beginning of the line, and now we got to go back to where we were in December.
Yeah.
Like that was my fear, is that all of a sudden we were totally like screwed here.
Yeah, and there was conversation of, do we need to fire this attorney and start over? And
yeah. And ultimately what happened was that, he was able to say, hey, we actually did file a second motion, or, we had a second eviction order that was approved with a longer termination date. And so the sheriff just needed to look at that other order, and they didn't. And I'm like, all right, why don't you call them and tell them, what happened, and that it was an oversight. And he's like, well, this is kind of going back to where you were talking about earlier, where it's like, well, we can't really push them too much because then they may not like us, and that's just going to make things more difficult. And I'm like,
it just seemed
dude,
ridiculous.
we were on the schedule. We were supposed to be, this was supposed to be done the other day, and all of a sudden we're not, and it's been like another month, and we have no idea what's happening. Yeah. And it's just chaos in my head. It's chaos in my head because I'm like, dude, this is never going to end. And so we finally were able to kind of push the guy a little bit. And so, but he had to go back to court. I don't understand why, but he had to go back to court to file a motion for extension. And after he came out of that court date, and that was on August 12th, he came out of that court date, he's like, hey, there was actually a new judge. And I was like, what does that matter? And he's like, and so they issued a 7-day extension on this. So like, this new judge issued another 7 days for the tenant to realize that like, hey, you're being evicted, and like it's now coming like imminent or something. And so then 7 days goes by, and then the order extending eviction. Let's see, what did I write there? Okay, so then we got the order extending the eviction until December 17th of 2025. So now all of a sudden we've got our expiration date is now in December. And I'm like, okay, it's gonna happen this year.
Yeah, and again, that's valid to get on the sheriff's schedule,
to get on the
right?
sheriff's schedule.
Yeah, you've got this window now to schedule with the sheriff to actually do the eviction.
Yeah, and then at the end of August, we get a notice that, hey, it's probably going to happen within the next 2 weeks. And then 2 weeks goes by.
Sheriff. Yeah. 2 weeks for the sheriff.
And then 2 weeks goes by, and we don't. It doesn't. It doesn't happen. Like on the 14th day, I'm asking, hey, it didn't happen within this next 2 weeks that you said. What's happening? So then we finally, the attorney starts asking his other partners. And he's like, yeah, I think we might have to like maybe sue the sheriff's department for not doing their job. And like he started asking his colleagues on if he should do that. And I'm just like, this is a disaster, man. What a nightmare.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, we're not just suing the tenant. Now we're suing the sheriff to do their job.
Yeah, which just sounds like an impossible feat.
So within this like exploratory phase of are we going to sue the sheriff, we then get notice that the eviction is going to happen on September 15th. And so so that was on Monday this past week. And we got notice of it on Friday that it was going to happen. And on Saturday, here's an interesting part. I haven't heard from the tenant in a while, and the tenant messages me this very long thread about their personal situation. I won't go into it, but within this very long thread that he's talking about his family members and, you know, the backstabbing that's happening and just their problems and whatnot, he says, can you come over and like fix the pilot light on the hot water heater because it went out? And my response is just I go and I message my handyman to go check out the pilot light, and then I just text him back and I say the pilot light is on, because I know on Monday he's going to get evicted. Then the eviction day happens, right? And so I have to be there between 8 a.m. and 12, and the sheriff's going to show up at some point, right? So I have to meet them there, and you only have 5 minutes to approach them, so you got to make sure you're not, you don't miss them. And that, like, I got these things that are happening in my head, because all of a sudden I get to the building, and they're like tearing up the whole street. There's like construction going on one of and we got a corner building, and in one of the corners, one of the streets, there's road work going on. I'm like, whoa, this is kind of a problem. And then so I park on the one street, but I'm kind of like hidden by the building. And then I'm sitting there, I'm waiting. I'm like, boy, it's 9 o'clock, 9:30. I'm like, did I miss the sheriff? Like, I'm sitting there, I'm reading a book, and I'm just like looking up and down, and I'm just like, dude, I hope I didn't miss the sheriff, because I can't see them, and I hope they don't. They should be easily identifiable, but I'm not identifiable, and then so I just start going through this like psychological craziness in my head of like, oh my God, I'm gonna miss this. Because
they don't call you or anything,
no,
right?
They don't
you
call.
just have to meet them, whatever that means.
Well,
right?
I found out that they ended up calling the attorney. The attorney sent me a message saying that they were coming soon. So that was good. But I didn't know that was going to happen. So again, I'm just like playing these games in my head of like, dude, I thought I saw a white car and it had like a sticker on it. I'm like, was that the sheriff? I'm like, no, I've seen sheriff vehicles before. Like, it's very obvious what a sheriff vehicle is. And I'm like, but I did see that van that had the sticker on it that said something about the city. And I'm like, did I miss it? And so it's just crazy what's happening here. And eventually, all right, so then they pull up. And I'm like, oh, that's them. Like, very obvious. These are sheriff squad cars. I go and approach, and there are 6 sheriffs that come up to me, and one of them is the main person leading the whole thing. And she pulls me over, and she's like, hey, just so you know, you're being video recorded. What are we doing today? I said, we're evicting from this one unit. And she says, okay, and who are you? I said, I'm the owner. And she says, okay, you're going to have to open the foyer door for us, and if the tenant doesn't open up the unit door, we are going to break down the door. I said, well, I got keys. And she's like, yeah, but we're going to break down the door. I was like, oh man. And so the attorney told me that like this could be a thing that happens, and so I did have somebody that was on standby that I could call and like, hey, if I need to fix the door, can you be available? Yeah. Well, so they go into the unit, they knock on the door, and they got like guns drawn. Like, one guy has it out of his holster, and
because they don't know if the person on the other side is going to be hostile. Or,
right, they have no idea.
Yeah.
And so then
there was somebody else there too. There was a social worker.
Yeah, there were 2 social worker girls that were there. One of them was wearing like pajama pants. I was like, this is weird.
Irrelevant detail, but okay.
Well, it just I didn't know who she was. She was like, and she was wearing a bulletproof vest, but it didn't look like a normal bulletproof vest. It just looked like a regular like a Girl Scout vest. Like, that's what it looked like. And then she was wearing pajama pants.
Are you sure it was a bulletproof vest?
It had to have been, because the 2 girls were wearing the same one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, you sure it wasn't just like an identifiable vest? Or
No, it was just black.
Oh.
It was just black. And it looked like a little bit heavy, but not like police officer heavy, And and again, one of them was just wearing pajama pants. And I was just like, are you guys with them, or what's going on here? And she told me, and she said, yeah, I'm a social worker. And I said, okay, cool. And so I watched them go into the unit, and then it takes them about, I don't know, a half hour to talk to the tenant. And basically what happens is that they pull the tenant out, and the eviction is complete. And so they come up to me and they say, hey, Jason, come over here real quick. And they go to the tenant, and they're like, hey, do you recognize this man? And he says, yes. And he said, okay, Jason, the eviction is complete. You're going to have to give them an opportunity to come get their stuff, because they don't take their stuff. He just came out of the unit holding a grocery bag and the clothes on his back, and that was about it. And they said, okay, we're done here, so we'll see you later. And so all 6 sheriffs walk away, and the social workers are like kind of off. Like, it looks like they're walking away too. And so then it's just me and the tenant like looking at each other face to face. And I'm like, boy, this is awkward. I said, do you have somewhere to go? And he's like, no. I'm like, oh. I said, okay, well, here's what you got to do. I said, call my attorney and like, work out a date to come and get all of your belongings. I said, you want your belongings, right? He's like, yeah. I said, okay, so make sure you call them within the next 7 days and so you can arrange for a time to come get all your stuff. And then I go and change the locks. And I lock the foyer door, and I'm working on the unit door. And, like, you can see right outside, because there's a window there, and the guy is just hanging out. The tenant's just hanging out right on the front step. And I'm just like, and I'm working on the door. And then he ends up, like, mouthing to me. He's like, hey, can I come in and use the bathroom? And I'm just like, no, you can't come in and use the bathroom. Like, I just had to forcefully evict you.
Yeah.
The sheriff told him that if you go into the property, like there's a big green no trespassing sign. If you go into the property without permission, you can get arrested. Mm-hmm. And so he asked me for permission, and I ignored it, and I said no.
Well, because it's a little bit of a risk, right? Like they were supposed to leave November 30th, right? And they've been there that entire time. And so you let them back in, it's like, well, okay, now you got to call the sheriff back. You're not going to physically forcefully remove somebody from a building, right? So you just start that process all over again. Potentially, that's the risk.
Oh, potentially, yeah. Or he could have came into his unit. He could have grabbed something and maybe was a weapon.
That was the other thing, that you were aware that these tenants did own firearms, and so it was a real concern for sure about just the process is wild. It's like you go through all of these steps and hurdles just to get to the point of getting control over the property that you own again, just for them to like leave you there with this person that you just made homeless, right? And not you, because obviously it was their actions that led him to that point. But that was a weird, like, emotional day, I feel like, because we've been so frustrated about this entire process and how crazy it is. Like I said, that you could own a property, not be getting payment for it, and literally have no control over getting that property back. But then we got to eviction day, and it was emotionally upsetting, because you realize, and not that you didn't realize it, but the reality of doing this process is the result of somebody standing outside the door saying, I have nowhere to go. Yeah. I have nowhere to go. Yeah. And that doesn't feel good.
Oh, no, that's the dirtiness of, being a property owner and providing housing to people. And, unfortunately, you have to make these really hard calls of, I could have kept those guys there, right? I could have continued to allow them to stay in that unit. They paid me their $950 rent. The building just remains disgusting.
Impacting other tenants.
Because of this massive bug problem that we have. It's spilling over into other parts of the building. And it's not sanitary. Mm-mm. And I can't good consciously say that I'm allowing these human beings to live in a place that is completely unsanitary.
Yeah,
right?
It probably isn't even up to code with those sanitation standards.
Oh, absolutely not. Yeah. Absolutely not. Mm-mm. Absolutely not. And so that was kind of what helped me kind of like personally get through all of this and realizing when I was, because it's one thing if like you're just a piece of shit tenant that's just not paying you and like you're causing all this problem.
Kind of gaming the system.
Right? Totally gaming the system. And that actually happened we had another one of those where actually we did place somebody. This was somebody that we did place and we got totally worked. This was a professional tenant, but she met the criteria for the unit in terms of income and then her credit score. And then all of a sudden she moves in, she pays the first couple of months of rent, and I've got this guy who was not on the lease, who didn't follow through with the application. Now he's the guy I'm talking to in terms of when the rent's being paid and who's paying it. And now all of a sudden I got this phantom guy that I didn't even know that was living in the unit is now living in the unit, and I'm stuck. Because then he tells me, hey, I'm not going to pay you. And so now I'm in a moment of, as I'm going through this other eviction process, well, I could start this, and which I certainly did. But then I went to him and I said, hey man, we got to make a deal. And we made a deal, and I paid him $2,000, and they vacated the unit. And it was only just a couple months of missed rent, 2 or 3 months of missed rent versus 10 months.
Yeah.
And then we were able to get somebody back in, and a good tenant that's now paying. Mm-hmm. And so long story short is that doing a cash for keys deal like that is absolutely what you want to do. You never ever want to take this the distance. These eviction things, unless you have to, unless you're kind of forced to, in which we were forced to because these were incapacitated people and they couldn't move out.
And they told you to do the eviction notice so they could try
Right.
to get resources on their end as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, either way, either scenario is, it feels very risky and like it through the actual like encounter that occurs.
Yeah.
And it's weird emotion because you've got the business side of it and then you've got the human side of it, and
Yeah.
there's not a perfect easy answer, but at the end of the day, you can't live for free. So
Yeah, you can't live for free. That's for sure. This is what it cost me. It cost me about $1,600 so far for legal fees, and then we missed at least 9 months of rent. Yeah, because it was December, and then it was September 15th when they got out, so it was at least 9.5 months.
And they personally are out, but all their stuff is still there. So you still are not able to. So the eviction's done, but you are still not able to access the
Yeah.
unit yet because their stuff has to be.
Yeah,
removed.
it's going to be a full 10 months of rent. Yeah. Yeah, so it's going to be a full 10 months of rent. So that's going to be another $9,500.
Yeah.
So plus the $1,600, so we're over $10,000 in loss.
Yeah, so far. And if they
Right.
choose not to take everything out during their window, if they're like, oh, I'm just going to grab a couple personal items and leave all
Yeah,
of
there's
their
gonna be a
their
turnover.
hoarding
Yep.
stuff, then you've got that.
Yeah, there's a turnover
to
cost
incur.
and
Yeah.
renovation cost, obviously, as we're going to go through all this. So it's racking up. It's going to get really expensive here. But, this is all part of it, and this is all part of the risk. As we start to realize that, like, boy, this would really suck if this was the single-family home
Yes,
and
this has been
that
a
we
huge
rented.
conversation
When you
for
only
us.
have one tenant and that person decides to not pay you anymore, all of a sudden you are at a massive, massive disadvantage. It's insanely risky.
Yeah.
And we were just lucky that we had 4 other tenants in this one building that were helping support the mortgage. And that was fine. Because that was supporting the mortgage and we were making those payments. We weren't making any money on it, but or we were making a little bit of money on it, but we weren't really, if we had repairs and stuff, all of a sudden it's tight. Like we need that unit to get up to the market value that we believe it is, to get us, in a lot better shape.
Yeah. It makes those single unit rentals a lot less attractive and something we've been talking about quite a bit.
Yeah, exactly.
But we'll also say this is where location really matters because we're talking about properties in Cook County and in Chicago, and the tenant rights there are significantly more favorable than they are in other areas of the country. So it'll, depends on where you're at, where you own property.
Right. Yeah.
So.
Because you can just go over to Indiana and they have a totally different system where I believe it's like you can have an eviction done in 60 days or something like that, you know?
Totally different.
And or same thing in Tennessee, I believe. And those are red states, so it's kind of the difference between red and blue states here. But at the end of the day, I still think Chicago's a great place to invest. It's just that you have to understand these issues, and yeah.
All right, cool.
But that's our story. That's our story on the first eviction, and hopefully you found some value in that. And so now you can kind of know what to expect. At the end of the day, I would not recommend an eviction. I wouldn't recommend the attorney that I worked with.
Didn't say his name. That's all right. No need.
But and then you decide, dude, just go with the cash for keys thing. Don't even try to go the distance on this eviction. Just don't even try. Just cash for keys, whatever it's going to be. Because look, if I got to pay somebody $2,000, I already told you that this was a total over $10,000 already. And so it doesn't make any sense for you to go the distance on these evictions. All right. If you found any value in the show, please share it, and we will see you in the next episode.